Back in 2015, the United States thought, wow, China's economy is growing too fast. We have to do something about it. So how? We decided to launch a financial attack on China. It was a pretty bold move, right? The idea was to use the classic dollar tide strategy to destabilize the Chinese economy and profit from it. But China didn't sit still. They fully anticipated this and began preparing for an economic battlefield between the world's largest and second largest economies. You can't help but wonder, can China really win? How did they do it? Let's analyze it. So the US knows how capital markets work. It's all about chasing profits, right? Think about it. In the years leading up to 2015, the US was actively creating an environment that encouraged capital inflows into China. Policies like quantitative easing flooded global markets with liquidity, making emerging markets, including China, highly attractive destinations for investment. On top of that, the US also maintained strong trade ties with China, essentially facilitating the accumulation of those massive foreign exchange reserves. This wasn't just incidental. It was a strategy to integrate China deeper into the global dollar system. By doing so, the US could, pull the strings when the time was right. You see how that setup worked? When America goes all in with quantitative easing, a ton of global capital starts flowing into China because, let's face it, China's economy is booming. Like, they hit $3.8 trillion in foreign exchange reserves. That's a crazy number. Just think about it, all that money pouring into China. Now, here's how foreign exchange reserves work. People bring dollars to China to do business, exchange them for yuan, and boom, those dollars go into China's reserves. So yeah, $3.8 trillion means a lot of dollars flowed into China, making it the top country in forex reserves. And if they could harvest China's $3.8 trillion, oh boy, it'd be chaos. Like, the stock market would evaporate overnight, sending investors jumping out of windows. Well, figuratively, I hope. And then, capital outflows would tank China's real estate market. That's a double whammy right there. Well, here's the thing. China's real estate market is like the US stock market. It's this huge reservoir for savings and wealth. Most people buy homes on loans, so if property prices crash, it's game over. You'd get a full-blown economic crisis, kind of like Japan in the 1980s when their real estate bubble popped. They've been stuck in economic limbo for, 30 years now? Yeah, not a great scenario. China knows it's not just about economics, it's national security too. If they crash like Japan, their neighbors might start getting ideas. So nope, not an option. China's like, we're not letting the US take us down. And they double down on reforms. First off, China goes after leverage. You've got people using borrowed money to invest in stocks, which, okay, can lead to insane returns if the market's climbing. But it's a disaster waiting to happen if things go south. In 2015, China's stock market was ridiculously over-leveraged. People were turning millions into tens of millions with borrowed cash. Sounds great until, it all collapses. China decides, better we pop the bubble ourselves than let the US do it. So, they start this painful deleveraging process. The stock market tanks, really tanks. From June 15th, 2015, the Shanghai index drops from 5,178 points to 3,373 in just a month. That's trillions evaporating. People were furious, saying the government didn't understand the economy. But, in hindsight, it was a genius move. They're like, yeah, we'll take the hit now to stop the US from cashing out at the top. It's kind of like this brutal martial arts move where someone's poisoned your arm, and instead of waiting to die, you just chop it off. Harsh but effective. Another huge move, reforming the currency. See, the yuan used to be a shadow currency for the dollar, and this setup carried a lot of weight in international trade. Historically, pegging the yuan to the dollar provided China with a stable and predictable trading environment, which helped facilitate the rapid expansion of its export-driven economy. For instance, during the 1990s and early 2000s, this relationship allowed Chinese manufacturers to offer competitive pricing on goods, flooding global markets with affordable products and gaining significant market share. This stability also gave China a huge advantage in negotiating trade deals and cementing its role as the world's factory. By anchoring its currency to the dollar, China effectively gained access to the global economy on terms that were incredibly favorable to its growth ambitions. The strategy wasn't just about economics. It also reflected a deep understanding of how to leverage financial systems for national gain. It's like, by shadowing the dollar, China was playing chess while others were playing checkers. When the dollar went up, so did the yuan. When it went down, same deal. The US hated this because it gave China this big advantage in trade. I mean, American manufacturing just couldn't compete with cheap, high-quality Chinese goods. There was this crazy example during the Gulf War. People were buying US flags to show patriotism, but, surprise, all the flags were made in China. Even funnier, they couldn't find a single factory in the US to make flags, so the government had to build one. Yep, that's how bad US manufacturing had gotten. China's strong manufacturing and cheap currency led to massive trade surpluses with the US. By 2009, China had a $150 billion surplus. American goods just couldn't compete. Even US military gear, boots, uniforms, you name it, were made in China. The US starts whining about China manipulating its currency, keeping the yuan low to boost exports. They try everything: diplomatic pressure, media campaigns, even books saying China's stealing American jobs, safety, and higher returns of US assets. Currencies in countries like Brazil, Turkey, and South Africa plummeted, forcing central banks to burn through foreign reserves or raise interest rates themselves, steps that further slowed their economies. Even developed nations weren't immune. The stronger dollar made it harder for exporters in the Eurozone and Japan to compete globally, straining their economic recoveries. The Fed's move didn't just test China's economic defenses, it reshaped financial dynamics globally, creating both challenges and opportunities for countries navigating the stormy waters of a dollar-dominated world. That's when the real showdown begins. Higher US interest rates pull dollars back home, triggering a capital exodus from other countries. For China, this was the financial equivalent of D-Day. China had to hold the line. They'd spent decades building their economy, and losing this battle wasn't an option. To stabilize their economy during this critical period, Chinese leadership implemented several decisive strategies. They reinforced capital controls to manage outflows, increased transparency in financial markets to boost investor confidence, and intervened in currency markets to mitigate excessive volatility in the yuan's value. Additionally, they strategically adjusted monetary policy to maintain liquidity and supported key industries to stabilize employment and economic growth. These measures weren't just reactive, but part of a broader effort to demonstrate resilience and long-term stability to both domestic and international stakeholders. Leaders worked around the clock, crafting strategies to stabilize the yuan, control capital outflows, and, well, win this economic war. So, yeah, this whole thing was like a financial world war. The US wanted to take China down a peg, but China fought back with some gutsy moves. They let the stock market crash on their own terms, reformed their currency, and braced for the Fed's big play. It's kinda inspiring, you know? Like, no matter how tough the situation got, China refused to roll over. They took some hits, but came out stronger. And honestly, that's a lesson for any business or country. Sometimes you gotta make tough calls to stay in the game.